This is a conversation unlike any other on this series. I sat down with Judy Selby, a cyber insurance coverage lawyer with 34 years of experience advising insurers on claims, policy wordings, and emerging AI liability. She's the author of the AI Insurance Equation and was named 2023 Cyber Risk Attorney of the Year and recently presented to 200 Lloyd's Market Association members on why AI matters to insurers. In this conversation, Judy breaks down what happens when AI goes wrong and when someone has to pay, why most CISOs have no idea what their insurance actually covers for AI, why a deepfake CEO impersonation might not trigger your cyber policy, and the 3 questions every security leader should be asking their insurer right now, but isn't. If you have never thought about the insurance side of the AI risk, this episode will change that. Let's get right into it.
Probably heard of some of these situations where there were the algorithms went a little crazy apparently, and entire swaths of people were excluded from being considered for employment, like women over 55, men over 60, people with foreign sounding names, all these kinds of things where these were not intentionally programmed in. But we all know what happens with the algorithm, and that's the beauty and the awe of AI, but it's also the scary part of AI, that despite trying to fix it, in some cases, the error kept happening. One thing that will not help a company if they get sued for anything arising out of their AI use is to say, it's a black box. We didn't understand it. We just used it. We didn't really know what we were doing. I'm not a technical person. That's not really going to help.
Thanks a lot, Judy, for joining the AI GovSec Discussion Series. Really appreciate you taking out time to do this with me and share your wisdom and knowledge with the community. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much for the invitation to join you today. I think this is an important conversation. And so I was very happy to take you up on the invitation. But yeah, my name is Judy Selby. I'm an insurance coverage lawyer. I've been practicing, this would be 34 years, so a really long time, and focused almost exclusively on insurance coverage on the insurer side that entire time. And I would say maybe the last 15, 16 years or so, I started focusing almost exclusively on cyber, privacy, techie media types of issues and claims. So I work with insurers on claims, and I advise insurers, including underwriters, on policy wordings, and actually do some policy wordings work myself. So that's kind of what I do.
Got it. Thank you, Judy. So let's dive in that amazing background. I know you sit at a unique intersection. I think most CISOs never see who has been my primary guests on this podcast. Because I think what you see is where AI risk or any sort of cyber risk becomes financial liability through insurance claims or sort of coverage disputes, right? How did you get here, and what made you focus specifically on the cyber insurance side of things, and then further probably AI risk if that started to come in as well?
Yeah, well, the cyber was, you saw it as a kind of greenfield back then. Cyber insurance was very new. Nobody ever heard of it. And it started to be, it was a very kind of niche product for a while, and it was very difficult to sell. We always say it was hard to, people didn't think they needed it unless they were a big retailer. If you think back of the big Target breach or the Home Depot breach, people were like, well, I don't handle a lot of credit cards, so I don't have to worry about cyber risk at all. And then we're not a big hospital system. We don't have a lot of PHI, so we don't really worry about it. I remember speaking to someone at a private equity firm once, and he said, we have no cyber risk. And I said, you have no cyber risk? This was probably 2016, 2017, something like that.
Okay.
And I said, how do you have no cyber risk? And he said, we fly under the radar. So there are like all kinds of crazy things, and people didn't understand, and they still don't. And you, as your audience probably knows much better than I do, they still don't understand their cyber risk. And one important thing is cyber insurance is kind of a misnomer, because it's much broader than cyber. Privacy risk is massive. It's in the US, there's a ton of litigation around wrongful collection and use and transfer of information. So it's a huge issue, but we'll call it cyber insurance for purposes of this discussion. But people didn't know what the coverage was. They didn't know that they had the issues. So I can't remember what year it was. I wrote a book on cyber insurance and I called it Demystifying Cyber Insurance, 5 Steps to Getting the Right Coverage.
Mhm.
And the advice I gave then is just as good, I think, as the advice I would give today to any entity interested in cyber insurance or any kind of insurance, really. And so I practiced pretty much exclusively in that area for a long time. And then I tried to stay very current on technology and what is happening that impacts the risk that would impact my clients and their insured. So I use this expression, help my clients see around the corner, like what's coming. So that's what led me then to take a big interest in AI. Just watching CNN for 5 minutes,
Mhm.
it's really, unless they're talking about the war, it's really AI stories and data center stories. And so I got very interested in that and thinking about how it impacts my clients and their insureds. And so that's what led me to write that more recent book on AI and insurance coverage.
Thank you for that context. I really appreciate. And I'll take it slightly further because you mentioned already, right? You wrote the AI insurance equation, right? So, which is a practical guide for insurers on how AI related exposure presents and how underwriting claims teams should prepare. And just reconstructing maybe your previous book, which you talked about, and this one. And what's the central thesis? What, from your perspective, you wanted the community to understand with both the sort of pieces? And specifically for AI, what you still feel that the community are confused and it needed more hand holding with?
Yeah, for AI in particular, and you're right, it is the same basic kind of premise. For example, in my first book on cyber insurance, I had the 5 steps. I think the first step there, if I recall correctly, is one of the 5 steps. I'm pretty sure it's the first one, is to know what your own risk profile is. That's exactly the same with AI. Exactly the same, because it wasn't that long ago, just a number of months ago, that people thought it was exclusively a cyber issue. And it is absolutely not exclusively a cyber issue. And so for people to, from an insurance perspective, to on the company side, we'll say, on the entity side, the policyholder side, it's really important for the policyholder to understand what their risks are. They're going to need to know what they're doing, and they're going to need how that fits in terms of potential liability. So I always talk about the AI technology lifecycle. And I have this graphic that I use all the time in all my presentations. I probably should have sent it to you and we could have popped it on the screen, but it goes through the different roles that companies play throughout the life cycle. For example, are you the developer? Are you the integrator? Are you the third-party vendor who's selling these systems? Are you the actual deployer or the end user? So where you sit in that life cycle in large part determines what your risks are. And so it's very important, I think, for companies to understand that. And when you understand where you sit and who's behind you and who's in front of you there, then your potential risks become much more in focus. And then, depending on what those risks are, different insurance policies can be implicated. So one thing that I think people didn't really appreciate is, and probably still don't, is just how many different types of insurance policies can be impacted by AI, by a company using AI. It's really almost any policy you can think of, from, of course, cyber,
Mhm.
and I suspect we'll be talking the most about that, but D&O around decision making for using AI within your business, how you're representing that to the public and to your shareholders. There's this new concept of AI washing. AI washing can refer to a number of different things. Most recently, I've heard it referred to companies that are laying off lots of people, claiming that it's AI efficiencies when
Mhm.
they were really overstaffed to begin with.
Oh,
And so they're trying to use it as some kind of cover to mask maybe some bad governance of their own enterprise, something like that. And then when I first started hearing about it, it was kind of selling capabilities, like entities' capabilities around AI that what they really couldn't deliver. Like, we can do this and we promise that and this, and they just couldn't deliver on it. So that would impact your directors and officers types of insurance. So if you're some type of a developer, though, you could have product liability claims, things of that nature, because you're selling a product, and all these kind of failure to warn, misrepresentation, all the types of things in the commercial marketplace, depending on where you sit. And I think there's oftentimes a lot of focus on the company that's actually using it and spitting out the final output, or that's interacting with the public. That's where it can get really tricky. And that's especially true in entities that are highly regulated, or in areas that are highly regulated, such as healthcare, financial services. So decisions about who can get a loan, lending, employment decisions. You've probably heard of some of these situations where there were the algorithms went a little crazy, apparently, and entire swaths of people were excluded from being considered for employment, like women over 55, men over 60, people with foreign sounding names, all these kinds of things where these were not intentionally programmed in. But we all know what happens with the algorithm, and that's the beauty and the awe of AI, but it's also the scary part of AI, that despite trying to fix it, in some cases, the error kept happening. And so let's say that an entity develops an HR product and they put it out in the marketplace, and it goes through all the channels of commerce, and then the end user ends up licensing it and using it at scale. And let's say lots of companies are using it. And so they don't want to read 5 billion resumes every day. So they use this AI tool to ingest the resumes and screen them, basically. And then the lawsuit comes in, and the lawsuit is, you discriminated against me because I'm Black, I'm white, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm old, I'm young, whatever it may be. And so they sue that company that was actually using it. Now it gets really interesting. Whose fault is it? Was it really their fault? Did they not implement it correctly? Was it like a user problem? They didn't know what they were doing. They weren't following their instructions. Basically, they weren't governing it correctly. Or was it a problem with the way it was developed way back in the initial stages? Or was it misrepresented somewhere along the line, or failure to warn about certain issues with it? And so I think that's a good example of where you sit in a technology lifecycle, the type of claim you can be hit with, and then the type of insurance policy that might respond to that particular claim. And then I would be really remiss if I think this is more responsive to one of your later questions, but maybe I'll preview it a little bit here. The contracts in place among all these entities is so, so, so important, because I think what we are going to be seeing probably more than anything is contract disputes. I bought this tool from you to screen all these resumes, and it got me in all kinds of trouble with regulators and the public, and reputationally we're getting hit, and now we have these class action lawsuits, whatever it may be. And they're going to look at their contract with whoever they bought this from and see, can we transfer this liability somehow to this other party, and so on and so on. And so it goes all the way down the chain. And so one thing I would urge your audience is, CISOs have a lot on their plate, and First of all, they're not insurance people, although they think a lot of people wish they were. And they're not contract lawyers. And so, and I know this is easier said than done, believe me, but getting the right people in the enterprise involved in the decision making around this is really important. One thing that will not help a company if they get sued for anything arising out of their AI use is to say, it's a black box. We didn't understand it. We just used it. We didn't really know what we were doing. I'm not a technical person. That's not really going to help you. And so I think there are some big concepts that companies should keep in mind around their use of AI. And one is it really needs to be explainable. If anybody comes calling, if they get sued, if the regulator comes calling, a business partner of theirs comes to them, they need to be able to explain what it is and what it does with some expertise. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be transparent about what you're doing. And depending on what you're doing, you need to make the adequate disclosures. In the US, we're a mess over here when it comes to regulations, and we can't do anything the easy way like some other countries where you just have a national law. We have like the patchwork of all the different states doing whatever they're doing, and it makes things really complicated, and I recognize that. But these laws are starting to crop up now in certain states that are requiring disclosures around AI usage for certain things that you're doing, and particularly in those high risk areas, like I mentioned before, like lending, housing, healthcare, things of that nature. I'll stop talking for a second and let you.
Just enjoying the conversation. It was really, I never heard and never thought from this perspective. And this is just like an eye opener that this is so much important because right, left, and center organizations wants to double down or triple down their productivity, deploy AI agent in your procurement processes, in your sort of financial processes, in, as you said, about the HR and talent management processes. But then all of this, like understanding what actually is happening, what goes in that black box, I don't think so many organization has ever been done.
Well, your audience will appreciate this because it's very much like Cyber 2.0, and you're probably all familiar with the concept of security by design, privacy by design, and it never happens. It never happens. And we're kind of doing the same thing here. Companies are implementing AI in different ways at breakneck speed. And is it governance by design? Is it security by design? Are these things even being thought of? The concept of the human in the loop. And one really interesting phenomenon about AI is that I think, like anything, once you start to use it, you start getting more comfortable with it and you start to trust it more. So you monitor it less. And that's where it can get really scary and bad because AI is not like anything else. It's like you get a new appliance and you use it for the first time, like a new washing machine or whatever, and you stay there and you watch it. It goes around. And then you realize, okay, it's doing what it's supposed to do. That's fine because it's a washing machine. It's not going to be the same with AI, especially agentic AI. And that's, I think it's our human nature to get comfortable, ease up on the supervision, you trust it. And that's where I think things can go wrong. And then I always tell my clients that any type of case going back for 34 years, something goes wrong, you need to have a good story to tell. You just need to have a good story to tell. And so if your story to tell was, we thought it was fine last year, that might not be the best story to tell. So
Understood. Understood. And this is really the right summary, I would say. Just out of curiosity, even for my knowledge, going back to your example, which you highlighted about the resume scanning via the AI and then a lawsuit appearing, in those cases, from your perspective, how do you deal with that if an organization has got it and they have, let's say, implemented a startup solution, which is using any one of the big LLMs model, which they have used and they have put a wrapper around it and sold it to, let's say, an organization? How would they deal with it?
Yeah, the first thing they should do is call their insurance broker, call their insurance companies, whatever it may be, and understand, do we have coverage for this? Are we covered for whatever the particular claim against us is for? Is it a product liability claim? Is it a whatever claim, depending on, again, where you sit in that life cycle? And then simultaneously with all of that, you need to look at those contractual relationships.
Right.
Did we buy this with certain warranties or representations from somebody else that this type of thing would not happen? And what does that contract provide in terms of liability and risk shifting if something does go wrong? Am I indemnified by this? Do I have an obligation, like right away, to tell that other company and demand that they defend and indemnify me from whatever is happening right now? And if you don't do that, companies really should do that, understand what these contracts say and what they mean. The insurance company will probably do that. When you tender the claim to the insurance company, one of the first things an insurance company likely will do would say, do you have coverage with anybody else? Do you have indemnity from anybody else? Send us those contracts, send us those policies, whatever it may be. And so you have to look at this from the insurance side, from the legal side, from the PR side, depending on all of that. And so having the right insurance coverage in place, a lot of these claims are going to be errors and omissions types of claims, tech E&O, depending on if you're providing a technology service or product to a third party, or some other type of professional liability, depending on what you do. Like, what are you doing for a living? How are you involved in this mess to begin with? What coverage is implicated? Now, are people being hurt? Are people being physically injured by it? Is it a bodily injury claim? Is it a product liability claim? Is it an unfair trade practices claim? There's all types of things. So you really need to examine all of those issues, look at your coverage, look at your contracts, and see how they all play together. It's so important, and again, easier said than done, when you're buying insurance or when you're entering into these contractual relationships around these products and services, that you don't just assume, oh, these contracts are just all boilerplate, whatever. You might not have leverage to change it if you're dealing with some massive entity and you can't say, we'd like to change like paragraph 12 on page 392, subpart B, they'll tell you to take a hike. But it's important to still know that you're taking that risk on for your own business purposes. It's important to know what your insured risks are and what your uninsured risks are. So things that you just need to know for your own business planning purposes. But when you're dealing with these contracts, you need to know, what are you giving away? What are you taking responsibility for? I have a case now where it involves a tech issue, and I work with the insurance company. So the insured is covered under the policy. So we asked for their contract, the contract the insured had with the other entity. And we also looked at the policy application, and the insured was asked, I would expect, by the way, for underwriters to ask more in-depth questions going forward about these types of issues. But they were asked, do you have favorable terms in your contracts with your business partners around transfer of liability and indemnity and these types of issues? And the insurer checks yes in the box. So we get the contracts and we read them and we're like, holy moly, they misunderstood the question. We meant favorable to them, not favorable to everybody else they were dealing with, because they basically like gave away everything to the other side. So you can try to get your lawyers to negotiate good terms around indemnification, defense obligation, insurance coverage, meaning you want to be covered under their insurance policy, and all different types of policies, things of that nature. So focus on those contracts, but also going back to one of the earliest points that we were discussing, understanding your own risk profile. So understand the types of liabilities, sit down if you can, the CISO, the CFO, the risk manager, legal, privacy. And I know in many companies, that's sometimes one person wearing all those hats, but try to understand the 360 of your risk profile. Then you're in a much better position to talk to an insurance broker to get the right coverage that you need. And that's really the key. And your insurance coverage should dovetail very well together. And so the importance of getting a good broker, especially in this area, this is not like the fire insurance policy or the whatever policy. You need somebody who is savvy and current on these issues. And if you have the budget, and I've been recommending this for years in the cyber context for cyber and privacy risk, you might want to hire a lawyer who can help you do that, who will talk to you and actually review the policies, your insurance policies word by word. I'm not pitching my own services. I don't do this type of work. So I'm not trying to sell myself here. But the policies are cyber policies in particular. And again, when I say cyber, that means cyber, privacy, tech E&O, media. They're usually combined in one. They're very complicated forms. And we always say, we have these old jokes because we're geeks. If you've seen one cyber insurance policy, you've seen one cyber insurance policy. They're all different. So don't assume nothing. Like if what you see in policy A probably will not be what you see in policy B. And the details really do matter. So get some really good counsel around that, either a really good broker and or an attorney who can help you do those things if that's possible for you. But a broker should definitely be possible.
Got it. And I'll ask a very layman and silly question here because some of our community and listeners might not know this already, and that's why for their benefit. And because I know you have been mentioning, and even I understand the relationship. I think you have mentioned sort of 4 characters or 3 characters: underwriter, insurance broker, attorney/lawyer, and I think the insurance provider. High level explain what each one does.
Sure. Well, let's start with the insurance company. So the insurance company, the insurer, the carrier, sometimes people call them, they issue the insurance policies. So they're the ones when you buy the policy. I have a million of them on my desk right now. You won't be surprised. The name is on the top and they say, we agree to insure you for whatever. A broker is sometimes they're affiliated with particular insurers. Sometimes they're independent. It just depends. But they're the ones who work for the policy holder, and they will guide you on the types of coverage you need and the right policies to get the limits of coverage. There's a lot of, especially in the cyber space, there's a lot of entities that are underinsured, meaning they don't have enough insurance for their potential liabilities. And that's scary because your coverage taps out at a certain amount. An insurance agent, on the other hand, works for an insurance company. So I don't want to get too legalistic, but there's differences between an insurance agent and an insurance broker. So a lawyer, the type of lawyer I was referring to would be like an independent lawyer in private practice who has a specialty in insurance coverage and who can help you identify what kind of coverage would work best for you. Is your current coverage doing what you think it's doing? Unless you're a total geeky, crazy person like me, most people do not enjoy reading insurance policies. And they are complicated and they're long and they're kind of legalistic in some ways, but they're contracts. They are contracts. And so it's not a time to be complacent and just hope and assume that everything is right, because your risk profile can be very different from your best friend's company's risk profile, depending on what you do, who you're doing business with, and the type of product or service that you provide and how you operate your business. What's your business operation? What type of information are you dealing with on a daily basis? How much are you holding? Are you dealing with consumers? Are you going back to that old example? Are you like collecting lots of PHI? We don't worry too much about credit cards anymore. Fortunately, we don't have the big credit card breaches anymore, but all of those things go into that risk profile you have that impacts your exposure.
Understood. And thanks a lot for putting them down in such a brilliant language. So moving on from your answer, I know you've described about silent AI exposure as well, sort of where AI risks are picked up by your existing policies, like professional liability, DNO, you mentioned general liability without being explicitly addressed probably in the policy itself. Can you explain what this means from a CISO perspective? I think you already did, but just again, a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm happy to, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. So people kind of took that term from cyber, the silent cyber issue, where exposure for cyber and privacy claims were manifesting in insurance policies where the underwriters probably had never dreamed it would end up with a cyber or privacy claim, but there they were. So I think that in AI, it gets a little bit misconstrued, and it started, I think, in the cyber area. I remember getting calls like a year and a half ago, probably maybe 2 years ago. If a threat actor uses AI and we have a cyber attack, is our cyber policy going to cover it? And what's getting lost here is this idea of what triggers coverage under an insurance policy. So the trigger of coverage under, let's say, a general liability coverage is, very loosely speaking here, negligent bodily injury, negligent property damage. So if you come to my house and you trip on a rug and you get hurt, that's going to be covered under my policy, right? My homeowner's policy, unless I tripped you, which is probably not going to happen. But I don't have, the insurance policy doesn't have to say, I cover you if somebody trips over your rug, right? You're covered if a box falls off a shelf and hits Mary on the head. It doesn't have to get into that. And so for AI, I think a lot of people are looking to see the affirmative words on the paper. Now, unless the risk is not covered in the first instance, the harm is not covered in the first instance, or unless there's an exclusion, if this is the type of harm the policy was designed to cover, it's probably going to cover it. And I'm speaking very broadly here. So that's the idea of silent AI. Like, you don't need the policy to say, like the cyber policy will cover you even if the risk was caused by an AI enabled attack. The policy is triggered by a cyber attack or whatever the words of the policy may be. Now, again, maybe partly for marketing purposes or whatever, some insurers will have added things to their policies as we cover like a deep fake, or we cover like a this or that. Well, yeah, you were probably covering that before anyway. Now, unless there's one policy on the market where they cover deep fakes, but they also provide a little extra coverage where they will provide coverage to go after like a fake website or whatever and take it down, things like that. So the bad news for you and everybody in your audience is that they really have to read the insurance policies or find somebody to read the policies for them and see what's there. I personally have not seen any AI exclusions in cyber insurance policies, but I am only one person. There's hundreds of different forms on the market, and oftentimes they're manuscripted, especially for large companies. Like, they're not using forms, they're using things that the insurance company and like probably the insured kind of write together in many ways and issue those coverages. But it's really important to know what your particular policy says about these things. So, but I think there's been a lot of reporting in the press, the Financial Times, and then it gets picked up. You've probably seen it about all these AI exclusions. I think a lot of them they've gone to regulators to have them approved, but I don't know that they're in use yet. I don't know that they're actually being used in the insurance policies. So just as companies want to understand or should want to understand what their risks are for around using AI or implementing it. Insurers want to know what risk they're insuring. And it's important for insurers, if they're going to say, we're going to cover you, and meaning if something goes wrong, we're on the hook, to understand what you're doing and to try to put some financial parameters around what would this look like if it went wrong? What's the financial exposure here? And so it's important for insurers to be able to try to figure that out. And so I think that's where we are now. Insurers are trying to feel their way. Policyholders are trying to feel their way. But it's good that it's being discussed. It's really good that it's being discussed and that people are here talking about insurance, which is nobody's favorite topic unless you're somebody like me. And but to realize the importance of insurance, and again, going back to one of the foundational points, you need to know what your own risk profile is and what your potential exposures are, and then get the right coverage for that. And so even if you can't get all the coverage you want, there's real value as business owners or operators to know where you're uninsured or where your risks are not transferred via insurance or via the contracts you have with your business partners.
Got it. Really helpful. And just taking it a little bit further, so, and very layman examples, because I'm seeing it day in and day out, and I know that CISOs and security leaders are worried about this. Shadow AI. So, for example, the company has basically given them a Gemini or, let's say, Copilot or any other tool which is sanctioned by the company. But then the employees are bringing in personal tools via their personal subscriptions because they feel that it's best for coding or best for image or best for presentation. Now, sometimes by mistake, they leak the sensitive data of the organization, which was not supposed to go out, goes into via the personal subscription into the AI. Now, if a loss happens, let's say GDPR, data protection, whatever ways, how does that organization will stand against the insurance provider? Is it their job to make sure that the employees are not using shadow AI, or how doesn't, in layman terms, the organization deal with this situation?
Yeah, it really depends on what happened, whose data was at issue. In the typical context, if the insured is holding responsible for PII, PHI, or another entity's proprietary confidential business information, and there's a disclosure, like an accidental disclosure or something like that, there's coverage. Now here, was it an accidental disclosure? If an employee purposely puts it in a network. So these are, a platform. So these are things that is very fact driven by what data, whose data. Was it your computer system? Was it your platform the employee put it in? All of these types of issues. Now, I am not the underlying liability lawyer. I'm just a coverage lawyer. So I just look to see how it would fit under any given insurance policy. But those are the types of issues I would be looking at. And going back from a liability perspective, going back to what I said earlier about being able to tell a good story, what story do you tell after that? From a liability perspective, I think that could be important. For example, do you have a very firm policy in place that you have made very clear to your employees? No, you can't do that. That you have your own systems locked down so they can't do this, at least on your own system. They can't download whatever and use it on your network. Things like that, so that if something happens, you say, here's our policy where this employee was told not to do this and signed on the line and said they understood the policy. And here's where we implemented these technical safeguards as well. And some more things like that you can do. It probably reduces the chance of it happening. But if it does happen, at least you have something to say. But in terms of your coverage, will really, everybody's favorite answer, it's really going to depend.
No, I think the key there, which you are describing, is the organization has to do certain actions. It cannot be like, I really knew that this could happen, or ideally the organization should have policy procedures in place that how it is acting to protect those informations
Correct.
that the employees. So ideally the story should be around that, and the action should follow the story.
Yeah. Now, what impact any of that has on insurance? Who knows? Now, if an insurer asks in the application, let's say before you get your policy, the insurer says, do you have a policy and procedure around this issue? Is it enforced? And you say, yes, absolutely. We do training on this.
Yeah.
We're great. And then you have the claim, the insurer may say, excuse me, I need to ask you about what you said like 6 months ago. So it's a fluid situation.
Understood. Yeah. Right. And moving on, I think this is also something which we read as well. The Gartner predicts that there will be more than sort of 2,000 legal claims in 2026 linked to death by AI.
Yeah.
And so basically, I couldn't understand until I read what is death by AI claim actually look like, and which industry should be most concerned about.
Yeah, well, I think any industry where you're probably public facing, but not necessarily only them, but where I think where you're surrendering control. So you think of eugenics in healthcare, for example, where you're allowing AI to determine whether radiology image is negative or positive or whatever the right word would be. It's where you're kind of making diagnoses and treatment decisions. Well, you're not, your machine is. Those types of situations where your concern is hallucinations and frankly mistakes. Now, I don't know if Gartner was talking about this in the death by AI context, but in terms of a critical infrastructure, if something catastrophic happens in terms of critical infrastructure, power, water, any of those kind of life-saving or things that impact the community as a whole, if something happened there, where now, and there were cyber incidents. There's one in London a few years ago. There was a cyber attack on a hospital. And they were saying there were some deaths because of that, because of the monitors and surgeries having to be postponed and all that. I don't know. It's hard to just say only these entities need to worry about it. There's a whole bunch of lawsuits in the US about people engaging with chats and personal assistants and building relationships, and they named the AI assistant and like, she told me to kill my mother, or she told me to kill myself, or showed me how to commit suicide. We have these claims over here right now. So there's so many ways that it can happen because, especially when it's at scale. And like we were saying way back at the beginning, we don't know how these things play out over time because they're always learning. They're always ingesting more data and quote unquote learning from it.
Understand. And I think you have shared your thoughts around the deepfake fraud. And there was one of the sort of incident as well, which was like $25 million incident regarding Arup. And I think one of the things which I was reading through, which is out there in the internet across the articles, is that let's say if there's a deepfake CEO impersonation occurs, but then there is no malicious attempt or unauthorized access happened in the network, some of the insurance providers might pull the plug saying that there's no trigger for the insurance as such directly. Can you explain the nitty-gritties of this, and then how should a CISO think about the deep impersonation attacks here in this case?
Yeah, it's again my same old answer of it's really going to depend on your coverage. You really need to read, that would be under your cybercrime coverage. And oftentimes there's different types of coverage. So it may not trigger one of those types of cybercrime coverage, but it may trigger another. And some may require, if somebody is spoofing the CFO, for example, that it has to be via an intrusion in your network, where other policies may not have that. So again, understanding, and again, I'm not saying it's easy, but understanding what the actual policy provides for See, this comes back. You're doing your audience such a service by bringing up these issues, because now they know what to go to their insurance broker or their risk manager with and say, what if we have this situation where we have no network intrusion, but somebody spoofs the CEO or whoever? Are we covered for that?
Mm, exactly. Because even in my experience, I've never seen after the insurance policy documentation has been sent to the organization doing like a proper read between legal and InfoSec team regarding the cyber insurance. So I've never seen, but I think one thing I'm taking back from this conversation is you have to read every single word in that policy.
Yeah, read the words in the policy, ask questions, read the applications carefully, ask questions. Don't guess at your answers. If it's a yes, no, but it's a yes, no answer, or option, but it's a little bit more complicated, try to have a discussion around that. Now, it depends on who you're buying from and whether there is a broker involved at all, those types of things. But I think that's really important. And right now in cyber, at least, it's what we call a soft market, meaning it's a buyer's market. So policy holders have lots of leverage to kind of negotiate. And there's so many insurers on the market now, so many offering all different types of coverage. So you can look for what suits your needs best.
And one, probably on the same tangent again, just exploring that, I know there have been a lot of discussion on the AI-driven pricing as well, where organization price things based on the algorithms view and behavioral signals and session-level data, flight prices. As an example, now that probably some of your thoughts were that they are also becoming a new liability vector, creating exposure, let's say, under privacy, consumer protection, deception theories. Is this kind of again a risk or a cyber/AI risk which CISO should be thinking through? Because I'm not sure if CISO are involved at all in those type of discussions.
Yeah, well, hopefully not for their sake. But yes, absolutely. This dynamic pricing is a big deal. There have been a number of lawsuits around that. And it's going to depend on the decision making of the tool. And is it being applied in a deceptive way, an unfair way when you're dealing with the public? Unfair trade practices? Are you hiding the prices? Are you misrepresenting? Are you treating certain protected classes of people differently from others? Are you charging me more because I'm a woman? Are you charging me less because you more because you're a man? Whatever it may be. So yeah, this is a huge issue, and the regulators are involved too. So it's important. I don't know if it was actually a case of dynamic pricing or not, but there was a case recently. I can't remember what company it was, but somebody was on X, I think, and posted something like, I think it was to an airline or something. I can't remember what it was, and said that I need to travel someplace. Can I get a better fare or something, like a bereavement fare or something? And the feature said, go back to your computer and clear your cache and then run your search, which made them think, oh, you're looking at things you shouldn't be looking at to set my pricing. And so that ended up in a lawsuit. So, yeah. And then there was something, this might not be dynamic pricing, but Air Canada, there was a situation a few years ago where the AI chat box gave a price that was apparently wrong, and then the company didn't stand behind it, and it was all a big mess. So they got in trouble as well. So
Got it. And in such cases, for example, on the Air Canada example, I know it would be contractual, but generally is the sort of the vendor who's providing the model for that, and maybe there is another vendor who has built the whole customer service chatbot. They are also brought into the equation.
well, you would think that the company that hired them, like the airline's vendor, I would think that they would be brought into this depending on the contract, for their negligence or whatever, that this was allowed to happen. I have a claim now where there was a company was sued for sending out unwanted or allegedly illegal like text messages or something
Right.
against the law in the US, this TCPA law. And so they then, of course, then look to their service provider who's in charge of doing that. And was it a glitch in the system? Was it whatever? So yeah, and then if you go back to that technology lifecycle, what happened there? I mean, things go wrong. That's why people buy insurance.
So if a CISO is sitting across to an insurer, reviewing the cyber policies, right? From your perspective, what are the sort of 3 questions you would advise that CISO should ask, or the insurer should ask about the AI coverage? Right now, they are not asking.
Well, I don't know if they're asking it yet or not, but if I were the CISO, the first thing I would ask is, I would ask the insurer, do you have any affirmative language in your policy addressing AI? Meaning, is it called out in a grant of coverage or in an exclusion from coverage or something like that? Is it discussed at all, or is it all just silent on AI at all? So I would definitely ask that question. I would ask, if I were the insurer, I would want to ask questions about what the company is doing with AI and how are they using it. And then I would ask proxy questions around, because if you're only asking questions, there's only so much you could do. If you're not like monitoring their network for what they're actually doing. But I think I would ask questions around the contracts. I would ask questions around, do you have somebody like a qualified person in charge of governance of your AI usage? Do you have a qualified person in charge of security of your AI usage? I would ask those types of questions where, if you can't, because of the market conditions now, if you can't get terribly in depth, but if you ask if a qualified person is in charge of it, I consider that kind of a proxy question for, this is on their radar. They know about the issues and they're taking steps to protect themselves. So I would ask those types of questions. And if I were the CISO, I would ask myself,
Mhm.
what is my risk profile? Like, where are my exposures? Or do I have product liability exposures? Do I have errors and omissions exposure? Am I dealing with the public? Do I have the risk of discrimination lawsuits? Is that going to be covered under my employment liability policy? Like all these different types of things. What are we saying to the public about AI? Like, use us, hire us, buy our solution, and we will quadruple your sales, like whatever it may be. And so understand, again, where all those liabilities can come from, and then make sure you try to get the coverage for those exposures.
And just on the back of it, because I know you've mentioned the AI governance, does the AI governance, or does having the right governance structure and model in place actually impact the insurance access and pricing?
It might. It's going to depend on the insurer who asks those types of questions.
Mhm.
One question that might be good to ask is, what assumptions have you made about that? As the insurer, what assumptions are you making about that are impacting coverage pricing? But it could, the same way you see cyber insurance questions, how many records do you have, and all those, what controls do you have in place? It's the same thing. It's the same if you get a property insurance policy on a factory. Do you have water sprinklers? Do you have exit doors? Do you have alarms? It's the same concept. It's important to remember, especially in the US, where our government can be somewhat dysfunctional in terms of getting things done. I hate to say it, but it's true. But you often see the insurance industry stepping in and saying, because they're the ones who end up paying for everything in the long run. So they're the ones who are behind the big push for reducing the speed limits on the highway. They're the ones who did the big push for seatbelts in cars and for crash standards in cars. and for sprinklers and things in buildings. A lot of that is insurance company driven. So we might see the exact same thing here in AI, where the insurers are driving the governance. We'll have to see how it plays out. We haven't talked about this at all, but we're talking here about kind of traditional policies, but there are a number of new policies on the market and more to come. Almost every week we're hearing about another one where entities are stepping in and providing explicit AI insurance coverage. And from what I know of these policies, they're different in intent and what they're wanting to cover and how they're doing it. Is it more of a warranty type of product for a developer, which wouldn't be suitable for certain entities, but perfect for others? Or is it a product for if somebody gets hurt, a bodily injury because of AI? It really is going to depend. Or if you get sued because of some AI liability. So to complicate the picture further, there are these new products on the market. So you have to take a very thoughtful approach to all of it. But I don't know, a lot of people are speculating, and I get asked sometimes, is the idea to funnel all the AI risk into AI policies? And I don't think we're there yet. We saw that in other areas where we saw cyber exclusions going into general liability policies and D&O policies and other things where there seemed to be an intent to get those risks into the other type of coverage. I don't know that will happen here, at least in the short term, especially AI is different from these other things because it's so embedded, and that's what makes it hard. And that's why during this one little discussion, we've talked about so many different types of insurance policies. And so I think it might be more challenging to do because we said it can affect your employment coverage, your general liability coverage, your product liability coverage, your E&O coverage, your cyber coverage, all of it. So I don't think it'll be that easy to do necessarily.
It does make sense. Final couple of questions. I need to do an episode 2 with you, to be honest, because I think everybody understands the information security, the techie, all of that. But this area, which has so much impact, which is actual sort of dollar value impact, right? I think in the whole InfoSec community, people don't understand this very well.
Yeah, well, you can't blame them. It's a fundamental shift in business operations, and it's really beyond information security. And information security is a lot to deal with in and of itself, more and more all the time, but this is something else. And so, again, the last thing any company wants to hear is have another committee. But I do think that the different types of role players within any company impacted by these issues we've been discussing is huge. It really cuts across the board, from your finance people to your marketing people. We haven't even talked about that stuff at all. The InfoSec people, legal, privacy, everybody is really impacted by this. And it's hard. Everybody's in a hurry to implement, which is the perfect recipe for trouble, right? Everybody's in a hurry to implement. And to the extent we're able to consider the long-term ramifications, even if you took the time to do it, you really don't know with AI, especially agentic AI, where it's all going to go. And so getting all the stakeholders around a table, thinking these through and having a plan in place for if something goes wrong, like the kill switch for the AI, which is really important. I think Gartner talks about that too. And I think having a mindset not to be negative. I like to be a positive person, but a mindset that things will go wrong. Like they will go wrong, then not to be complacent.
Well, 100% aligned and really resonates. So I think I'll sort of pause the podcast over here. I do have loads of questions in my regarding some quantum as well, but I'll park it for now. I'll definitely reach out to you for an episode 2. I think this has been really eye-opening, very knowledgeable discussion. So I do want to continue it and put more light on it. So thanks a lot, Judy. Really helpful.
But my pleasure. I hope it adds value to you and your network.
It does, really does.
Good,
So
good.
thank you. Wish
Take
you a
care.
great
Have a good weekend.
you too. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.